right, historically, we're going to talk about the shoulders on which we stand. The VG galvani, as in galvanized wire, connected wires to a frog he killed, and whenever lightning hit the wire, the frog's leg would twitch. Mary Shelley loved that idea and wrote a book about it. Reanimation of dead flesh. He proposed, now this is pretty good, look at this when this occurred, 1780s. They didn't really have the anatomy of humans yet. We're still trying to figure that out, trying to correct Galen's colorful writings that had been in place for so long. He said there was some kind of electricity in the animal that traveled through insulated tubes that had little holes in them. That's exactly right. I mean, we barely have a microscope working at this point, and yet he is correct. Now, Alessandro Volta, as in volts, did create batteries from this information. He said, though, that the twitching was from two different metals, that there was no intrinsic force in the frog. And then, of course, Galvani stepped up and said, oh, yes, there is, and he proved it. He proved that there is an intrinsic electricity inside an animal. All right, I made this chart. It's not really a hierarchy. It's just a way of dividing the nervous system for you. That the nervous system is divided into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. And what's in the central nervous system? The brain and spinal cord, and that's it. And then the second that any part of any neuron leaves the brain or the spinal cord, anything that's outside of that is called peripheral. The peripheral nervous system, we have a couple of ways we could divide it. We could divide it as sensory motor, or we could divide it as somatic visceral. I chose to do sensory motor because that's kind of the way your chapters are aligned. Sensory is chapter 10. Motor is chapters 9 and 12. So chapter 8 is central. So I just did this again because that's kind of the way your book does it. So sensory, that means coming into the central nervous system. Messages coming into the central nervous system. They're traveling along afferent fibers. So those are sensory neurons that are coming in. Motor, those are efferent fibers. Efferent causes an effect. They are the effectors. So you remember our control system. Sensor, controller, effector. Sensor, controller, effector. Now then we can divide again. Sensory can be made up of visceral fibers, and that's what that's what you did in this week's lab. You were stimulating neurons that were going to the central nervous system. When you were shining in lights or tapping on the tuning forks, you were not aware of any of that, exactly what was going on. It was being transmitted directly to the brain, which was then interpreted. I hear vibrations, I hear voice, I see color. Somatic is from the skin muscle joints. So that's what next week's lab, you're going to poke each other with hot sticks and map cutaneous receptors. So visceral is from internal organs. It is always unconscious, subconscious. You are not aware of it. All you're aware of is what the brain tells you. So some of it you are in terms of a full bladder. Okay, you would feel that. But you are unaware of your small intestine squeezing and relaxing. Squeezing because you've just eaten something. It's got food in it. You are unaware of the changes of the smooth muscle around your blood vessels because your blood pressure went up or went down. You're not aware of that. So this is all chapter 10, and we cover it in 2 labs. The lab you just had and the lab you have next week. You'll have a Learn Smart on it, which I don't know if I've made that available yet.
Chapter 7.
Chapter 10. No, okay. But no quiz. All right, then motor. Somatic is just skeletal muscle. It's just those. And then we have a visceral. It gets called the autonomic system because it works autonomous of the central nervous system. It works on its own and without volition. You cannot do it. You cannot change your blood pressure. You cannot change your heart rate. You cannot make your stomach cramp or relax. So it is autonomous of your will. It does what it needs to maintain homeostasis. This is chapter 9. And it can be divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic speeds it up. Well, not always. Sympathetic prepares you for exciting activities, such as giving a presentation today.
Yeah, thanks.
Parasympathetic is what the rest of you are in. Rest and digest. You're sitting here nice and calm, except for Teresa.
Yeah.
So this is chapter 9, and when I talk about chapter 9, I'm going to pick up a little bit about somatic, because this is what homework 7 is. Homework 7 is a motor neuron going to a skeletal muscle. And it is our model neuron that we use to describe how a nervous system works. We're going to use a motor neuron. So then we'll use a motor neuron as our example when we start talking about the autonomic, how it differs from a motor neuron, which is what you cover in homework 7.